Did Donald Trump really launch strikes on Iran because of the Middle East? Or was something much bigger happening behind the scenes? According to economist Richard Koo, the timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Just days before the attacks, Trump suffered a major political defeat at home, one that could erase a key policy achievement and cost the US government hundreds of billions of dollars. And suddenly, the global conversation shifted. For weeks, everyone had been focused on US tariffs. Almost overnight, attention moved to a Middle East oil crisis. Coincidence? Koo doesn't think so. He argues this wasn't about long-term strategy, but a dramatic attempt to shift attention away from a domestic setback. And instead of solving the problem, it may have pushed both Trump and the global economy into a deeper crisis. Let's break it down. First, the turning point. On February 20th, the US Supreme Court struck at the core of Trump's economic agenda, ruling his reciprocal tariffs illegal. The consequences were massive. It wiped out a key policy achievement and raised the possibility that about $300 billion in collected tariffs would need to be refunded. Think about that. $300 billion potentially going back out. Politically, that's devastating. Foreign leaders who had negotiated under US pressure suddenly faced an uncomfortable reality. They may have been negotiating around tariffs that shouldn't have existed. Trump was now facing a major political crisis, and he needed something big, something dramatic, something that could change the narrative. Then, just days later, the war began. The US and Israel launched strikes against Iran. And just like that, headlines shifted. The tariff issue and the $300 billion problem faded almost overnight. But Koo argues the operation looked rushed. The US had been negotiating with Iran until the day before the strikes. Negotiations one moment, military action the next. That's not typical of carefully planned operations. The official explanation also raised eyebrows. The Secretary of State suggested the US joined because Israel might be attacked and wanted to avoid retaliation for a global superpower. That sounded unusual. Then came another awkward moment. Trump mentioned pro-American figures inside Iran were killed in the strikes. Critics asked if this was well planned. Why weren't they evacuated? To Koo, the answer is simple: the decision was rushed. They needed something dramatic fast. But the plan didn't work. The expectation seemed simple. Limited strikes, show strength. Force Iran to back down. Declare victory. Instead, Iran responded by moving to block the Strait of Hormuz. This is one of the most critical choke points in the global economy. About 20% of the world's oil supply passes through it. And Iran didn't rely on expensive weapons. They reportedly used cheap drones foam-bodied, powered by small engines with minimal heat signatures, making them hard to detect. The US Navy can defend against them, but at a high cost. The result? Shipping through the strait was disrupted. Fuel prices surged in Singapore's marine fuel market. Ports in Southeast Asia began restricting services. And it didn't stop at oil. The region produces roughly a quarter of the world's fertilizer supply, meaning the impact could spread to agriculture and food prices. What started as a military strike was becoming a global economic shock. Oil prices surged, and Washington began to panic. With midterm elections about 8 months away, rising oil prices became a political nightmare. Then came a move that shocked many governments. Trump lifted restrictions on Russian oil imports and resumed buying Russian crude for European allies. This was a shock. They had followed US sanctions and absorbed economic pain, and now the rules suddenly changed. All because of oil. At the same time, Washington asked allies like Japan, South Korea, and European countries to send naval forces to escort shipping. The response was muted. Most countries showed little enthusiasm. Privately, many believed the same thing: this wasn't their crisis to solve. Then came the irony. Trump reportedly urged Israel not to strike Iran's energy infrastructure. Why? Because pushing Iran too far could keep the Strait of Hormuz closed indefinitely, sending oil prices even higher. So the same conflict meant to show strength was now creating a strategic trap. Now pressure is building from all sides. Escalating the war risks a broader conflict and deeper economic damage. Backing down doesn't guarantee the strait will reopen. A full-scale ground operation? There's neither time nor political support. Inside the U.S., tensions are rising. Jerome Powell has pushed back against political pressure. And even members of Trump's own party are siding with the central bank. According to Coup, this points to something bigger. From losing the tariff case, to struggling with the Hormuz crisis, to growing domestic resistance, the political momentum that once seemed unstoppable may be fading. And here's the bigger lesson. Sometimes, leaders try to cover one mistake with a dramatic move. But when that move spirals out of control, the cost isn't just political. It becomes global. Because decisions made in Washington, Tehran, or Jerusalem don't stay local. They ripple through oil markets, food prices, and shipping routes, and eventually reach everyday life. And that may be exactly what we're witnessing now.